You're watching a movie called Not Wanted from 1949. This was an independent film produced, co-written, and co-directed by Ida Lupino. This is the story of a young woman, Sally, who runs off with a traveling musician. After he leaves her, Sally discovers she is pregnant out of wedlock. You can see how this might cause an issue in the late 1940s. Lupino had the idea to cast two unknown actors in her movie. For the leads, she picked Sally Forrest and Keefe Brasselle. Brasselle had already tried to make it in Hollywood, but found himself with only bit parts and disappointment. He was working as a truck salesman when Ida picked him to play the part. He was given his chance, and most in Hollywood, including gossip columnist Hedda Hopper, who referred to him as Little Sir Ego, thought he was destined for great things. But it didn't happen, though he was given many chances to make it happen. Was this a case of bad luck, or a man who overestimated his own talent? He was born Henry Keefe Brasselle on February 7, 1923, in Elyria, Ohio, to Marie and Henry Keefe Brasselle Sr., who were both ex-vaudeville entertainers. Sadly, before he was born, his father was killed in a traffic accident at age 22, so for most of his early life, he was raised by his grandparents. When he was 6 years old, Keefe Brasselle was the darling of the Parent Teachers Association of Elyria, Ohio. They called him the Little Bing Crosby of Elyria. After the town's American Legion Post took up a collection to send him to Chicago, where he won a Major Bowles talent contest, the town paper headlined him as Mr. Show Business Junior Grade. Brasselle is a graduate of Elyria High School, where he was a member of the cheerleading staff during his student days. He was also a former Chronicle telegram carrier and was a member of the carrier salesmanship team, which won a major Robert Bingham Trophy in international competition at Milwaukee, Wisconsin in June 1937. Mr. Show Business Junior Grade has plied his trade in various ranks of the profession. When he was 14, he barked for a sideshow attraction featuring a hula dancer. The carnival outfit sold the hula girl's contract to a circus, and Keefe, probably the biggest big tent huckster in circus history, went along on the deal. After his graduation from high school, the future screen star traveled with a teenage band, the first such outfit to tour the Middle West. He sang, played drums, and, after a year of tough one-night stands, began to write comedy sketches. The band acted them out while Keefe played the comic. He was sort of a poor man's Red Skelton. A Cleveland promoter saw the act and signed the young comedian for a series of personal appearances. Halfway through the circuit, Keefe was drafted. He wrote, produced, and directed 2 shows while in Camp Alabama, but spent considerable time in another endeavor, namely KP. I had 4 months of it, he recalled, probably a modern record. In December 1942, Keefe married his sweetheart, Norma Jean Ulrich, just before he was drafted into the military. He was 18 and Norma was 15. While in the Navy, he had his first film role, a short film called The Story of DE-733, also known as USS-VD, Ship of Shame. This 46-minute black and white film was produced by the U.S. government during World War II to show its young servicemen the results of fooling around with loose women overseas. It focuses on the results of sexually transmitted diseases. Keefe played a character named Chicken.
Chick, do you suppose she knows she's got it?
She couldn't have known. She's a swell kid, Doc.
Then you've got to protect her. We've got to see to it that she gets medical attention immediately.
But I wouldn't know how to break it to her.
Don't worry, the Navy has a way. Even better than you could do it.
I wouldn't advise watching this film unless you want to see some disturbing images. With 6 months left in the armed forces, he and Norma became parents, a little girl they named Erin, whom they called Mickey. Soon after his release, he went alone to California. He lived there with his uncle Ralph Brasselle. The plan was to bring his wife and child out as well as soon as he got his life together. The former Illyrian was discovered by Sue Carroll, agent and wife of Alan Ladd, who signed him because she thought his appearance and actions were similar to her husband's. Brasselle was given a screen test after a Universal director saw him doing an impersonation of Frank Sinatra. It wasn't until 1944 when he got his first part, an uncredited role in the film Three Little Sisters for Republic Studios, in which he played a soldier. That led to another small uncredited role in the Warner Brothers film Janie. Soon after, Norma and their daughter joined him in their small $35 a month apartment. The money he received for Janie didn't go very far, so to make ends meet, he began working for the Reeves shoe store for $40 a week plus commissions. At this time, it must have seemed like things were really happening for the 21-year-old. He was signed by Universal Studios for a role in a film called The Fairy Tale Murder. The film would be released under the title River Gang. It was his first credited role where he played Johnny alongside actress Gloria Jean. Keefe is good as the leader of a gang of boys who interest themselves in solving a crime. He may have gotten good reviews for his performance, but Keefe didn't think a lot of the film. In 1951, in an interview with Hedda Hopper, he said, "I once played in a film called River Gang. It was so bad I didn't get another picture for 7 years." He may have been exaggerating a little, as he was playing uncredited parts 3 years later and starring in a film 5 years later, but it still was a bit of a drought. Over the next few years, all the parts were uncredited, and then it looked like he was going to get his big break. He was able to get an audition for the Humphrey Bogart film Knock on Any Door. How was he able to get a chance at such a prestigious role? Luella O. Parsons, in her well-known motion picture column, in which she tells of the comings and the goings of Hollywood stars, wrote the following reference to a former Elyria boy, Keefe Brasselle. "Very pleasant to hear Betty Grable's cheerful voice on the telephone, sounding like a typical Hollywood agent plugging a young actor for Knock on Any Door. I read the book and I was crazy about it," Betty said, "and I was thinking I know the perfect young actor to play Mike, the boy who goes to the electric chair. His name is Keefe Brasselle, and he looks like he stepped right out of the pages of the novel." "How come the man is such an enthusiastic agent?" I laughed. "It's just that I think he's right. I would appreciate it if you could even get the word to Humphrey Bogart about how good O'Keefe is." "Consider it done, Betty." "Luella, first you got the name wrong, but anyway, one might ask, why would one of the biggest actresses in Hollywood care about a young bit player like Keefe? Well, it turns out that Keefe's mother is the hairdresser for Betty Grable. She even got Victor Mature to coach the young man for the part. But it wasn't to be. He had given up all thoughts of an acting career due to a series of bad breaks. Mark Hellinger was about to cast him in Knock on Any Door when the producer died. Eagle Lions set him for Louis Bromfield's Kenny. Then the picture was shelved. He had thought that was the end of his acting career, and to support his family he began taking jobs like selling cars. But then 2 years later he received a break. An article appeared in Movieland magazine about Keefe. He didn't have another picture, but he did have a job. He was selling trucks. He wasn't making much money, so he started his own Christmas card concern, printing the cards when he got home at night. He looked a little tired. The hours were long, but he was full of plans. It struck me that whatever he did, he always did it well. That's why he won't be selling trucks or greeting cards forever. He came back to the familiar ruts of an extra player, but another writer, Alice Canfield of the Fan magazines, also liked his sincerity and his working ambitions. In a feature called Movieland Magazine's Casting Bureau, she singled out the lad, following through by calling Ida Lupino and suggested Keefe and Loopy search for an unknown boy in Not Wanted. Ida Lupino was a British actress who was a Hollywood star, acting in such films as The Light That Failed from 1939, The Hard Way from 1943, and Pillow to Post in 1945. But she began to have problems with Warner Brothers, often refusing to be in films she thought were beneath her dignity as an actress. After a few suspensions, she decided to move into producing and directing independent films. Her first film was called Not Wanted, about a young woman who gets pregnant out of wedlock, a very serious topic for 1949. She was looking for unknown actors to star in the film. But the story gets brighter. Ida Lupino saw a picture of Brasselle in a movie magazine and looked him up. Now he is the second male lead in Not Wanted. Another article appeared in Movieland magazine a month after the other. Still, miracles do happen. In this case, the miracle was Ida Lupino, one of the most warm, human, sensitive, and intelligent women in this or any town. Ida picked up a copy of Movieland one day and saw Keefe's picture. There was something about his smile that stopped her glance. She started to read the story. There was the part about his lead in the old Gloria Jean picture River Gang. So he's experienced, said Ida thoughtfully. There was the part about him almost getting the lead in the Mark Hellinger picture Knockin' Any Door. And Hellinger believed in him, mused Ida out loud.
Here are some of the glowing young stars you found and created. First, young actor-producer Keefe Brasselle, who has just finished his independent picture, Death Over My Shoulder. Keefe Brasselle.
My God!
Ida decided I shouldn't be a truck salesman anymore, so I went up to her house to audition for her one day and gave probably the worst reading in show business, didn't I, Ida?
I didn't think so.
She took me right over into a corner and calmed me down, and she's a great girl.
What about your folks, Drew?
Oh, my mother died when I was a kid, and father passed away about 3 years ago.
Oh.
You have any family?
Yeah. But I guess they don't want any part of me by now.
Look, Sally, I don't want to pry, but... Well, don't you think you ought to let them know where you are?
Huh?
Don't worry, I knew on the bus that night you were pulling up stakes, running away from something.
Well, let's not talk about it now, huh?
Keefe Brasselle, the newcomer who clicked so sensationally in Not Wanted, is for sure wanted by MGM, where he signed a long-term contract today. Win Rockamora set the deal. Brasselle is just about the hottest thing to come along since Montgomery Cliff, and he'll be just about as busy. Before he reports to MGM, he has to first make Never Fear for Ida Lupino, his original discoverer, and then he goes on to Paramount for An American Tragedy. Not bad for a young actor who wasn't able to get past Studio Gatesman 6 months ago. It was a busy time for Keefe. Offers were coming in, and one was for an upcoming film, A Place in the Sun, as Montgomery Cliff's brother. Montgomery Cliff and Keefe Brasselle, who plays first cousins in A Place in the Sun, look a lot alike and are often victims of twisted identity. Keefe Brasselle, I once embarked on a dry cereal and tea diet for economic reasons, and it's great today to be able to eat steak and potatoes without worrying how I can pay for same. For being broke a few months ago, I'm a lucky guy with a 4-figure weekly paycheck.
Have a pickle.
Ah, I love you. You're no good thief.
Baby, you shouldn't talk like that.
Come on, how did you wangle him this time?
Well, this wasn't like the orchid job I pulled in Phoenix. That one had a certain finesse. Honestly, I really meant to buy them, but I was broke, and suddenly 3,000 gardenias passed in front of my eyes, and I went out like a light. And when I came to, I was clutching a couple of them in my hot little hand, and I love you.
Go on, Mr. Perryvale.
Every Clarion reader is a student, today or yesterday.
Excellent, excellent.
I was right back in your classroom again.
Yeah, so was I.
All right, sir, you asked it, now answer it. Is the student of today smarter than your student of yesterday?
Oh, they certainly are.
Oh, another thing. As you probably noticed, 9 out of 10 Eastman employees are women. And there's a company rule against any of us mixing socially with the girls who work here. My father asked me to particularly call this to your attention. That is a must.
Doesn't hurt a bit. All I want, Ida told the girl, is for my leading man, Keefe Brasselle, to walk as far as your door. The secretary took a long, lingering look at Keefe, standing beside Ida, and replied, "As far as I'm concerned, he can come right through the door. I'd love it." And just as things were taking off, he had to take a break due to a boating accident. Injured film actor in serious condition. Keefe Brasselle, young film actor, is in serious condition today with back and internal injuries suffered in a speedboat accident. This led to a stay in the hospital and a lawsuit. Maybe that's why Keefe started going back to school. Keefe Brasselle, recently signed by Metro, goes to night school 3 times a week. He's studying law. Maybe he's going to negotiate his own picture contracts. And then there was the question of why Keefe doesn't do beefcake photos like so many other young male actors. The fan magazines are on a beefcake splurge, stripping all of Hollywood's muscle-bound heroes down to their shorts. A new low was for a layout of Tony Curtis and Scott Brady wearing only towels in a Turkish bath. I asked Keefe Brasselle how he missed the strip teasing. "No beefcake for me," he growled. "I see nothing romantic in a hairy chest." but he quickly changed his tune. My fan club members thought I should prove I didn't have anything to hide, he said, and that I'm not trying to kid anybody. Actually, I think I've got a pretty good build. Besides, he went on, his no beefcake edict was making him a social outcast. I'd be invited to a swimming party, and when the photographers came around, I'd sit by the pool in clothes. After a while, I wasn't getting in fan magazines either. They all want beefcake. My agent gave me a talking to. He pointed out that Beefcake didn't do so bad for Alan Ladd and Kirk Douglas. Keefe Brasselle won the 12th popularity poll for newcomers. Keefe Brasselle won't be starring in any future pictures for the Ida Lupino Kohler Young Producing Group. The temperature between Keefe and Ida, who discovered him, is colder than the reverse side of a polar bear's lap. Keefe Brasselle wants to fill in his time between pictures, so he's getting up a band to play at army camps and hospitals. Betty Grable is the only Hollywood star who gets her own crowning glory brushed and curled by the mother of another star. Marie Brasselle is Betty's hairdresser, and MGM's Keefe Brasselle is Marie's prodigy. Says Keefe, Betty used to get me on the set so the producers would see me and tell everybody I was Marie Brasselle's son, and now she introduces mother as the mother of Keefe Brasselle. Now, a lack of confidence was never an issue for Keefe. So confident was he in himself that legendary gossip columnist Hedda Hopper began referring to him as Little Sir Ego. I can sell myself to anybody I meet. I've still got to do some selling of myself to the public, he said. I've got an idea. I'm going to take a tour of theaters. People think I'm just an actor, so I'll start out by doing a monologue, cut to a dance, start singing, then beat the drums. Brother, if I don't get a hand for that, I never will. Lights, camera, action, here comes Keefe Brasselle. Keefe Brasselle, out doing a PA tour, has his option lifted at Metro with a big increase in pay. In 1952, it was announced that Keefe won the starring role in the Eddie Cantor Story. The film was going to be made by Warner Brothers. Now, Columbia Pictures had made the Jolson story about the life of Al Jolson, and it was a big success. Warner Brothers wanted to do something similar, so they chose the life of American comedian, actor, dancer, singer, songwriter, film producer, screenwriter, and author Eddie Cantor. Both Jolson and Cantor were famous for doing blackface, by the way. Warner Brothers even hired the same director, Alfred E. Green. Keefe was a big fan of Cantor and fought for the part, but he had to be a little sneaky about it. He had already been working on his Eddie Cantor impersonation when he asked MGM for his release from his contract, claiming he wanted to go out and freelance. Little did MGM know he already had another opportunity in mind. About the same time, the last film he made for MGM was released, the Esther Williams starring film Skirts Ahoy.
And I introduce Keefe Brasselle. Hey, that's me.
I get a funny feeling when I'm alone with you.
Also appearing in that film were the DeMarco Sisters.
What good is a gal without a guy?
The DeMarco Sisters were 5 biological sisters who performed as an American closed harmony singing group. They recorded popular music and performed in concert, on the radio, television, and on film from the 1930s to the 1960s. The youngest of these sisters was 19-year-old Arlene, and I will get back to her in a little while. So the Eddie Cantor Story was Keefe's big break. He worked with both the real Eddie Cantor and Sid Solsky, trying to get every mannerism of Cantor down. He wore contact lenses to give him the big bug eyes that Cantor was famous for. One issue Keefe had was he was a foot taller than Cantor, so the filmmakers hired tall women to give the illusion of him being a shorter man. While the film was in production, it received a lot of publicity. Many predicted big things for Keefe. Even Hollywood gossip columnist Hedda Hopper wrote, "I want to get on record and say that Keefe Brasselle is going to be a big star and a big name in the business." Warner Brothers signed him for a 2-picture deal. He began planning out his next project, a remake of The Patent Leather Kid. All was going great. He began playing at the Flamingo in Las Vegas for $15,000 a week, with part of his act being the Eddie Cantor impersonation. His salary was up to $75,000 at the Flamingo the following year. However, at the same time, rumors began to appear about his marriage falling apart. The Eddie Cantor Story was released on January 20th, 1954 to mixed reviews.
I'm not a doctor yet. I'm still in medical school.
Oh, but you'll be a great doctor soon, Harry. I can tell the way you looked after Ida while I was away. But, Harry, I want to tell you something. I'm back.
Where are you going? Get back here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Marigold Gardens. We've got a great show for you, and our proprietor, Mr. Rocky Kramer, has spared no expense in bringing it to you. And I'm sure you're in for a lot of surprises. I'd like to start things rolling by singing a little number for you that I had the pleasure of introducing at the theater. All right, fellas, row, row, row. Rocky will fire you. All right, fellas.
And then he'd row, row, row. Way up the river he would row, row, row. A hug he'd give her, why he'd kiss her now and then. She would tell him when. He'd fool around, and then they'd get it again.
Many critics panned the film, and it wasn't the success that Warner Brothers and Brasselle had hoped for. In fact, it's considered a flop. Keefe Brasselle's delineation of Cantor, the grown-up star and father, is obviously meticulous but exaggerated. The Cantor trademarks, pop eyes, fluttering hands, dancing steps, and facial expressions are closer to caricature than life. We are constantly distracted by the grimaces and the contortions, the tension and effort that he puts into the characterization. In a variety show, a brief impersonation such as this might be well diverting, but a long one is wearing because of its basic unnaturalness. Keefe Brasselle plays Cantor, but it is a shallow caricature, at times almost grotesque. By May of 1954, Keefe cut the Cantor routine from his Vegas act.
You should have scraped your boots clean before you came back to the jamboree, partner. Red Canyon's the only place where there's any red clay that's wet. That's why he wouldn't tell you where he was, Sheriff. He's afraid I'd hightail it out there and help myself. Maybe you wouldn't mind giving me some information.
Sure. Such as?
I need a place to stay, hotel or something like that.
You mean a real hotel? Or a flop-type place? Because that's all we got around here.
I want something a little more permanent than that. I figure on staying a lot.
Well, it so happens there's a room for rent in the place I'm staying.
Where do I find her?
28 Frawley.
Thanks.
And I don't know what happened to the 2-picture deal he made with Warner's, but those pictures never happened. Keefe turned to television.
The great newcomer of show business, Keefe Brasselle, everyone. Keefe Brasselle.
Say, I could be happy, I could be sad, I could be good or I could be bad. It all depends on you. Look at that!
You know all that coffee?
You said it, baby. There's enough coffee there to keep 1 million people awake for the next 5 years. You see that little handful of beans?
Yeah.
Well, it's worth a fortune. You think that necklace is something? Someday I'll buy you a necklace made out of these.
Oh, Louie. Oh, Louie, you're rich. Why can't we go away and quit the rackets? I'm scared.
Baby, there's nothing to be scared about as long as I got Snag! Herman, where are you? I told you never to leave me.
All right, boss, I guess we must have go.
Keefe became a shareholder in the Flamingo and had a $50,000 office building constructed as an investment, but there were some hints of some problems in Keefe's personal life. Keefe Brasselle will bury his marriage license and his first movie contract in the cornerstone of his new office building. Won't it be awful if no one digs them up? By April of 1955, the Brasselles finally decided to call their marriage off. Of course, there would be attempts at reconciliations, as they thought of their 13-year-old daughter, but every attempt would fail. The Keefe Brasselles, after many spats and reconciliations, have decided on the divorce courts. The separation with all the court actions would take years, but I will try to sum it up quickly. At first, Keefe said Norma could have anything she wanted in the divorce. After a lot of back and forth in court, Norma was given everything she was asking for. Now, a couple things to remember as I talk about the divorce. One was how he studied law years ago, and the other is how he worked with the DeMarco Sisters a couple of times in the past. Up till now, Norma Brasselle won't even talk about reconciling with Keefe. She tells me, though, that she has her 13-year-old daughter to think about and won't rush to an attorney to file for divorce. The trouble between the Brasselles came to a head when Keefe went alone on that last trip to New York. Keefe Brasselle is home from New York and has moved into the apartment office at his new building in Beverly Hills. Still no reconciliation with Norma. Actor Keefe Brasselle's wife sued yesterday for divorce, alleging that in recent months he has treated her in a manner that caused her great humiliation, anguish, and distress. Mrs. Norma Brasselle, 29, accused the 32-year-old film player of extreme cruelty. Her complaint says they were married on December 18, 1942 in Cleveland, Ohio, and that they separated last December 17th. They have a 12-year-old daughter. There will be no trouble about the property settlement, he told me. Norma can have anything she asks for. If I have to start all over again, that's okay. New York will be his home in the future, said Keefe. He already has more TV offers than he can handle. If he comes to Hollywood, it will only be to make a picture. I think, as we will see in a minute, Keefe spoke too soon. By March of 1956, a settlement in court was reached, or so it would seem. Judge Prager awarded Miss Brasselle custody of Erin, 12, the couple's daughter, and approved a property settlement agreement under which the screen star will pay $770 a month for support of his wife and daughter. The agreement specifies he will give his wife 25% of his gross earnings, minus certain business deductions, or the $770 a month minimum. And soon Keefe was being sued for not paying his alimony. So, after saying that Norma could have anything she wanted, and after the courts seemed to settle the issue, he countersued for fraud. Brasselle, in a petition on file yesterday in Superior Court, charged that he returned from New York last January for what he thought would be reconciliation talks, but instead was served divorce papers by his wife Norma, 29. The actor, 32, signed a property settlement at the time to clear the atmosphere in a try for reconciliation, he said. He agreed then to pay $616 a month in alimony plus $150 a month for support of a son, Erin, 12. Mrs. Brasselle denied his allegation of fraud. And that led to an undivorce, whatever that is. And then he filed a complaint claiming it was her who was the cruel one. But part of Keefe's complaint was that he wasn't properly represented in court. But Mrs. Brasselle, represented by attorney Edward M. Raskin, declared in her answer that she and his own business manager, Robert Scott, advised the actor to obtain the services of a lawyer. She says he refused, telling them that he had once studied law and could represent himself in property negotiations and thereby save fees he would have to pay a lawyer. To me, this says a lot about Keefe, thinking that he was more qualified than he actually was. And he was always the showman. When he arrived in court, he claimed he was so broke he had to borrow $2 to get there and smiled happily when he posed for photos with the 2 bills. Still, he was ordered to pay $650 a month, and by September was found guilty of contempt for not paying his alimony. Keefe Brasselle's just never going to get out of the woods on these support payments, it appears. Now he faces 2 contempt of court actions and is due before the bench in another hearing. And in a bizarre attempt not to pay support, he threatened to never return to Hollywood to escape payments. And it still wasn't over as the 2 went to court to fight over their property. Finally, in December of 1956, the couple were officially divorced, and Keefe didn't waste any time in getting remarried to Arlene DeMarco, who gave up her career as a singer with her sisters to be with him. While all this was happening, Keefe was given a test show on NBC, with the idea that if things went well, he'd have his own regular show. And in November of 1943, signed a 5-year contract with NBC. And meanwhile, there were always stories about him buying one film property or another. Most of these never saw the light of day. He appeared on various TV shows, and even went out to the UK to make a couple of films. And if all this wasn't enough, he also began a recording career. Keefe Brasselle's first warbling bid for jukebox coins will include songs he wrote himself. I Want a Song with a Beat and I Really Hate to Say Goodbye. And I have no idea what this was all about. A little to their surprise, Keefe Brasselle and Alan Gordon, former Hollywood press agent, are in business together. They made a bid on some C-82 cargo planes and were awarded 9 of them. In August of 1955, his relationship with NBC came to an end as he began his own production company. Over the next few years, there were appearances on TV, he did a bit of theater work, a record here and there, and the occasional film. But in 1957, he got his own television show. It was a game show originally titled Lady Luck, but then retitled Keep It in the Family. The show didn't last long. Martha Raye and Keefe Brasselle to team up for a 10-week tour to include Alaska and Hawaii, and bells are ringing during early fall. Keefe Brasselle intends to produce a musical flicker in London next fall under the banner of his own production company, Vicar Productions Limited. In June of 1955, Keefe was signed to play in a version of The Tender Trap at Lancaster's Fulton Theatre. After a few days of rehearsal, however, he quit, saying the director doesn't know how to direct. CBS TV is eyeing Keefe Brasselle to star in a series about a singing private eye. Oh, for heaven's sake! He also became a semi-regular on The Red Skelton Show. Keefe Brasselle has had 15 songs published under the name of Harry B. Singer, and there will be a small prize for anyone who can figure out why. Dear Dorothy, the answer is simple. When I tried to sell a tune with my own name on it, they thought I was an actor who thought he was a songwriter, and they wouldn't buy. So I put the name Henry B. Singer on the songs, and said he was one of the greatest talents in the business, that he wrote my act and all my material. Then they bought it. If I can't do anything else, I can sell. In June, Keefe signed with CBS. The president of the network was James Aubrey, an old friend of Keefe's. Keefe Brasselle signed with CBS, TV president James Aubrey, to produce 5 spectaculars about different sections of the U.S., and 2 film shows. He's also appearing in some of the specs. Keefe Brasselle is now enthusiastic about a special that he's trying to put together. What I want to do, he said vibrantly, a series of 5 spectaculars. These will be musicals based on the historical inceptions of the various geographical areas of our country. Nor do I intend to have any messages in them. They'll be pure entertainment, and I hope to be able to do them with sort of an old-fashioned George M. Cohan Yankee Doodle Dandy spirit. Was he afraid they might be a little corny? I don't care if they come out corny, he replied buoyantly. The American people love corn. As far as I can tell, these specials never materialized. Keefe Brasselle, who played Eddie Cantor in the film on Eddie's life, is now writing his own autobiography. And if they make a movie out of it, says Keefe, I want Eddie Cantor to play me. Keefe Brasselle's biography, Reach for the Highest Rung, will be ghosted by Alice Canfield. A magazine wants to serialize it before March 61 publication date. The drama? Keefe made $1 million before he was 25. Then, Zoom went broke. Keefe Brasselle phoned he's back in town to produce a TV show for himself, Beachfront, and another called Joe E. Trouble. I asked him who will be in that one. I'm looking for another Keefe Brasselle, he said. Keefe Brasselle, actor turned TV producer, has done a disappearing act, causing a delay on the ambitious series he was working on for CBS. Rumor has it that he's plagued by domestic troubles, but it's only a rumor. In early 1961, Keefe opened his own club in Neptune, New Jersey called Keefe Brasselle's Hollywood Club. Unfortunately, on July 28, 1961, the place burned to the ground. It was arson, as investigators found 6 empty 5-gallon cans smelling of gasoline. 2 men who were badly burned in the fire were thought to be responsible for the disaster. One man died of his wounds in the hospital, the other would stand trial. It was about this time that rumors began to surface that Keefe was involved with organized crime. Miss Smith, noting in pageant that a number of writers turned down the assignment to profile Brasselle because of his rumored mafia connections, asked him, "Why are you so terrifying?" He seemed, says Smith, to relish the question. "Why am I so terrifying?" repeated Brasselle. "Well, it all depends on who you are." As far as I can tell, over the next couple years, nothing really materialized with all the TV shows he was involved with. But in 1963, he signed to star in his own variety show. The show was a summer replacement for the Gary Moore Show. One of the regulars was Ann B. Davis, who would go on to play the maid in the series The Brady Bunch in the 70s. When asked about the show on the Television Academy Foundation website in 2014, she said, That was an incredible experience, let me tell you, that I don't want to do again. There were a lot of good things, but there were a lot of weird things in it. Strange people would come on the set, very well dressed, very well tailored, very soft spoken, and very scary. I didn't know what that was all about. I didn't want to know. The Keefe Brasselle Show would have semi-regulars such as Rocky Graciano, Fred Gwynne, Jules Mushin, Eddie Foy Jr., and Nancy Wilson, and would have such guests as a young Barbra Streisand, Liza Minnelli, Ann Sheridan, Zsa Zsa Gabor, and Leslie Gore. Once in a while, Keefe's wife Arlene would make an appearance. On the TV show, I won't be trying any comedy stuff. That's the quickest way to fall on your face. I may throw in a cute line or two, but that's all. I've got high hopes for it all. There's a lot of money riding on it, as much as on the winter shows. We'll be summer, but we won't look summer. Everyone will be taking us for the first of the fall shows. And the reason why is sitting in the next office, Fred Garrison, the guy who produced that last Danny Kaye special. The critics gave Keefe's variety show mixed reviews, most complimenting the guest while not too impressed with Keefe, and confused about why Rocky Graciano was on the show. Brasselle is a good-looking fellow who can sing a little and dance a little, but is a little awkward in the comedy department. He has surrounded himself with a program family, including Rocky Graciano, who is a better prizefighter than he is a comic, and a shapely blonde dancer named Noel Adams, who didn't do much dancing but strolled around the stage a lot in tights. The musical and dance portions of the show were pretty good, almost winter television quality, but the show obviously was in need of some decent comedy material or theme or something to tie it together. But the viewers seemed to think differently. I wonder how such a poor show as Keefe Brasselle's was allowed on the air. Especially pathetic was Noel Adams, an alleged dancer whose chief talent lies in wiggling her fanny in awkward, clumsy, badly timed dances. The Gary Moore Show may have had occasional bad moments, but it always had a professional finish and accomplished guests. It is unfortunate that it must be replaced for the summer by such a poor substitute. How did Keefe Brasselle get on television? He certainly is a lousy singer compared to Perry Como, Andy Williams, etc. Now those are real singers with voices. Brasselle's publicity describes him as an actor. I guess he sings all right for an actor. Now about his acting. I watched the Keefe Brasselle Show last night and it was horrible. My husband sings better in the shower than he does on TV. Worst of all, he thinks he's great. The show wasn't picked up for a fall series. In 1975, looking back, columnist Buck Biggers in an article called Television Tinderbox wrote, "The Keefe Brasselle Show, a CBS summer replacement for the Gary Moore Show, was proving to be one of the most amateurish, unfunny, low-rated productions in TV history. There are two ways to make a living in show business," explained the Ohio-born performer. "One is to sit by the phone and wait for your agent to call, and the other is to go break down doors by yourself. Method 1 is great if you happen to be Danny Kaye, which I'm not. I use number 2. Along with the variety show, Keefe and his wife were expecting their first child, the second for Keefe. She was a daughter who they named Roseanne Marie. And he was also preparing to produce 3 other shows under his new production company, Richelieu Productions. We asked him why he chose Richelieu for the name of his company. "Richelieu is my favorite cardinal," he replied. The shows were The Kara Williams Show, The Reporter, and The Baileys of New York. And this is where the mystery begins. As soon as the shows were announced that they would be produced by Keefe, a man with no previous experience in show production, and that they were going right into series without the customary pilot, people began to think something was up. Last summer's most bewildering TV mystery is why Keefe Brasselle warranted a series on the air. If you suffered through that excruciating mediocre variety show of his last summer, you'll be happy to know he won't be back this one. But Brasselle still has the willing ear of CBS president and program dictator James C. Aubrey, who is reputedly the most ruthless man in the business. 3 of his new programs in CBS's 1964-65 schedule will be produced by that lackluster entertainer's own company, Richelieu Productions, Inc. And he even hired the woman who discovered him, Ida Lupino, to direct some of the episodes of The Reporter. He had a 4th show in the works to be shot in Chicago. It was going to be called The Loop, but that show was stopped before it ever got started, possibly because of the lack of success of his other 3 shows. All 3 shows were canceled soon after they appeared on TV. And Then the Keefes had a second baby, another girl, Melissa. But the failure of these 3 shows was the downfall for his friend James Aubrey. While in the past he had such successes as the Beverly Hillbillies, Petticoat Junction, and the Dick Van Dyke Show, he met his Waterloo with several failures, including 3 Keefe Brasselle productions: The Clara Williams Show, Bailey's of Balboa, and The Reporter. Aubrey's friendship with Brasselle, who heads Richelieu Productions too, was a source of criticism from outside producers who claimed favoritism was being shown. Certainly it was common knowledge that Brasselle and the $225,000 a year executive were close buddies. In fact, Clara Williams told this reporter on the West Coast at the start of the season that she first went to Aubrey with the idea for her show, and not until after that did Brasselle enter the picture as producer. And all this ended up in a lawsuit. According to many of the people in television whom I'm acquainted, the recent firing of James Aubrey from the top spot at CBS couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Aubrey is the defendant in a suit filed by an irate CBS stockholder who alleges that Aubrey conspired with Keefe Brasselle's Richelieu Productions in a financial partnership, resulting in a financial disadvantage to CBS. The lawsuit also alleges that Aubrey caused CBS to pay Richelieu Productions far in excess of the true value of the shows and substantially higher than the prices for comparable shows. Keefe Brasselle has moved out of his Richelieu production offices at CBS following all that talk about his alliance with James Aubrey. But he's happy. He just won the celebrity guest golf tourney at Fort Lauderdale Country Club. Now, a lot has been written about Keefe's friendship with Aubrey and how it all went down. Some say it was just because they were old friends. Others say it was a money graft, while many rumors have gone around about Keefe's connection to the mob. Some say Aubrey had no choice in what happened. According to Harlan Ellison's 1983 book, The Other Glass Teat, Aubrey took the fancy of a young, attractive, dark-haired girl in Vegas. He beat her, or at least bloodied her lip when she refused his sexual advances. She was the daughter of a well-known mafia don who put a hit out on Aubrey, and it was only through his friendship with Brasselle that he wasn't killed. And that is why Brasselle was able to make these 3 shows on CBS. Though I have no idea where Ellison got his information. The only interview I found where Brasselle mentions the mafia was this. A reporter asked Brasselle if he would like to be known as a nice guy. Nah, the actor said. I've always been a nice guy, but not out in the open. Not in this business, never. You can't be a nice guy. Leo DeRocher is right. Nice guys finish last. People bait me. I get questions like, are you a member of the mafia? You know what my answer was? I said, if I was, I wouldn't be stupid enough to tell you. Whatever happened to Keefe Brasselle that used to be on TV? I thought he was great. You must be kidding. Brasselle quit his song and dance routines after his chum, Jim Aubrey, mentored him in producing TV shows. Brasselle had 3 shows, all bad on CBS, and was partly responsible for toppling Aubrey from the CBS presidency. Since then, Brazelle's name has been somewhat of a joke in show business circles. Tony Curtis, who in an interview about why he pleaded to play the Boston Strangler said, I even took my own photos of my face with a built-up nose. I tried all sorts of devices to change my looks and my career. Man, I didn't want to finish like Keefe Brasselle. According to Henry Bushkin's biography of Johnny Carson, Johnny would constantly make fun of Keefe on The Tonight Show. One night he was at a restaurant called Sneaky Pete's with Ed McMahon. A man named Walter Stevens came in. He asked McMahon to leave. He said that he had been hired by friends of Braselle's to tell Carson to stop with the jokes. At first, Carson didn't take him seriously, so he launched into a fury of punches to Johnny's stomach and liver. Carson dropped the jokes about Keefe. So for the next few years, Keefe was pretty absent from the public eye. That was until he and his wife separated, but for a weird reason. DeMarco Sisters says mate refuses to team with her. Actor, song and dance man and producer Keefe Brasselle has made his marriage loveless because of his refusal to have sexual relations with me. His wife, one of the famous singing DeMarco Sisters, declared in papers filed yesterday in Manhattan Supreme Court. Miss Brasselle, the former Arlene DeMarco, said her husband's unexplained coldness has caused her serious physical and mental harm. In her separation suit, she is asking for custody of their 2 children, 2 and 3, plus $750 a week in temporary alimony, plus $15,000 in counsel fees. For the love of him, I broke up a singing team that was internationally known and which made millions, she lamented. One might ask, at this point, what was left for Keefe to do? How about a tell-all book about his time working on TV? Keefe Brasselle, whose CBS TV history as a producer was the black comedy of several seasons ago, will be guaranteed $400,000 by Bartell Media Corp. for his fact-paced novel of network TV intrigue. Brasselle was CBS TV president Jungle Jim Aubrey's boy in the conniptions leading to both their firings. Keefe Brasselle's first novel, The Cannibals, based on his CBS executive associations, identifies Hollywood as the land of cannibals. As with Valley of the Dolls, start guessing the real-life prototypes. The book was poorly received, yet sold very well. The Cannibals by Keefe Brasselle is billed as a novel about television savage chieftains, in as poor a prose style as has disgraced any recent book. As phonetic as it is tortured, The Cannibals sets out to show who eats whom. No matter, it's the reader who gets the indigestion. As for the book itself, it has a lot of frantic movement, a lot of talk, a lot of drinking, a lot of girl chasing, and a lot of intrigue, and practically no depth, significance, style, or literary value. Skip it. I hate to even dignify it by mentioning it, but Keefe Brasselle's The Cannibals, supposedly the story of CBS internal strife, has to be one of the worst books I ever punished myself to finish. And like his last divorce, Keefe's new one went on and on. According to the dark-haired singer, Brasselle abandoned her and her children in April, and she does not know where he now is living in Florida. He was served, but did not make an appearance on the temporary alimony request. Charging cruel and inhumane treatment as well as abandonment, Arlene says that Brasselle, who played the title role in the Eddie Cantor Story, once punched her into unconsciousness, threw her over a bureau, dislocated her shoulder, and warned her, "If you stay with me, you'll live like a queen, if not a peasant." She also said that he took her $400,000 diamond engagement ring and refused to return it. Arlene says she was evicted from her Riverdale Drive apartment because of lack of funds and now is living with relatives in Plainfield, New Jersey. Arlene charged that the jet-setter Keefe should be behind bars for failing to pay $23,400 in temporary alimony to support herself and her two children, Rosanna and Melissa. Meanwhile, Keefe was starring in a production of Come Blow Your Horn. And during the divorce, it was reported that Keefe was going to wed the sister of his West Coast agent. Now, since the divorce wasn't final yet, Arlene responded by saying that she had a warrant out for him containing 50 charges, and if he weds as reported, there'll be 51. And on top of all that, while this was going on, it was reported that Keefe shot a man in a bar. That's right, Brasselle allegedly shot 29-year-old Richard B. Crawford in the chest with a .32 caliber gun during a Los Angeles barroom brawl. The man was seriously wounded. Keefe was arrested for attempted murder. He was jailed and first pleaded innocent, but later changed his plea to guilty. And somehow, and I admit I don't understand it, Keefe was only fined $730 and placed on probation for 3 years for this crime. I guess the punishment for attempted murder was a little different in 1972. And that about wraps up this biography of Keefe Brasselle. But before I get into his last days, I want to take a few moments to talk about his second wife, Arlene DeMarco. After the divorce, Arlene and the two girls were living on welfare. I want the taxpayers to know that I'm probably the only person in New Jersey ever to insist on signing an agreement to pay back every cent I received. In response to Keefe's book, Cannibals, she wrote her own book, Triangle. It's my answer to Cannibals and The Love Machine. She was back in Hollywood after a 10-year absence to promote her first book, Triangle, a scorching, sex-filled tale of show business to which the characters bear a striking resemblance to real celebrities. The portraits are mostly unflattering. Let's make no bones about it, I'm in it for the buck, says the dark-haired Miss DeMarco, but she denies she used the book to get even with the stars she dislikes. There are parts of my life in it, but only the author knows which parts. The book was a success and allowed her to get her life back together. She began a successful writing career and also was able to reunite with her sisters. As far as Keefe, he wrote a follow-up book to The Cannibals called The Barracudas. Occasionally, he appeared in a small stage production, got a part in an episode on a TV show like Adam 12, and appeared in the blaxploitation film Black Gun in 1972. His last film was one that he co-directed called If You Don't Stop It, You'll Go Blind from 1975. It was basically a low-budget skit show featuring every bad, dirty joke the writers could think of. Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune wrote, "This sleazy, unfunny sex comedy achieved a dubious first in Chicago moviegoing. It is so bad and has prompted so many patrons to walk out early in disgust that the Edens Theater in Northbrook was forced to post a no refund sign in front of its ticket booth." He goes on to say he only lasted 30 minutes before he walked out. In 1980, reporter George Gamester, in his article Whatever Became Of, wrote about Keefe but couldn't locate him. He contacted his ex-wife Arlene. When she asked his whereabouts, she replied, "I don't know where he is, but I'd like to hear from him. I figure he owes me $770,000 in back alimony and child support." On July 7, 1981, Keefe Brasselle passed away. He had been in and out of hospitals for over a year, suffering from a liver ailment. He was only 58 years old at the time. His death, reported Saturday, occurred Tuesday in Rancho Los Amigos Hospital in Downey outside Los Angeles after a month-long stay. I can't help but wonder what Keefe was thinking during those last years of his life. Did he reflect on some of the decisions he had made? Did he think about his 2 wives and 3 children? Was he making plans for a comeback, hoping the phone would ring, or had he given up all hope? How did it affect him as he watched his name slowly be forgotten? As far as I know, he never gave interviews later in life, so we'll probably never know why he did the things that he did, or if the rumors of a mob connection were true. We can only guess. I certainly don't have any answers. We can only hope that he found peace at the end, and those that his decisions affected lived a wonderful and happy life. In that interview with Ann B. Davis on the Television Academy Foundation's website in 2014, she mentioned that Keefe, while doing his show, refused to rehearse even the dance numbers. She would just have to watch his feet and try her best. I think that might sum up Keefe a little bit, but I don't really know.